Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, poisonous reptiles and amphibians alike. Join Sir Grimtales as we bring to you some of the creepiest stories of Reddit for 2023. Don't follow vultures. When I was younger, about 10 years ago, I got into bird watching. I was about 12, so it wasn't really official by any means. I was just some kid that liked to sneak up on birds, take pictures, and look them up in books. I decided to start this hobby by making a list with pictures I had printed from the library of native birds in my region. Every weekend, I'd wander around the neighborhood, which was suburbs smashed haltingly against large plots of land covered in brush, in search of new birds. With a few ponds and a large creek in the area, I found quite a few within my first few weeks. However, there was one bird I had set as my sort of white whale, due to its rarity in the area: the black vulture. We have tons of turkey vultures in my area. They are most common, but much fewer black vultures. They are a bit hard to tell the difference if they are flying too high. The best way to determine which vulture it is has to do with how much grey and white is in one of their wings. Unfortunately, I cannot remember the exact date or what month it was even. I believe sometime in the fall. But one weekend, I decided to spend the next 2 days searching high and low for the black vulture. I went climbing over the small wire fencing around a nearby brushy area, as per usual, keep out signs be blasted, and searched. Usually, you had the best luck finding scavenger birds on roadkill, beside the road, and there just so happened to be a small, 2-lane winder that mirrored the creek nearby, just through the foliage. So I cut across the sort of mini-forest, headed in that direction. As much as it made me sad to see a dead deer or possum, it was a common sight on this road, as both sides are open, with trees and undergrowth almost choking it. There are some parts of the road that almost become a sort of tunnel, due to the leaves intertwining above. It was incredibly easy for a deer or some other animal to jump out in front of a car, in the dark, with neither party realizing until it was too late. I didn't have much luck at first. There were a few crows on the smear of a squirrel, and I saw a few ducks swimming the creek beside me, but nothing big. It started getting late, but the sun was still up, and despite the dangers of walking down a forest road in the dark, I was determined to stay out as long as possible. I decided to reach a small park area at the end of the road, and then I'd make my way back. I went under a small tunnel of leaves and came out the other side, and was delighted to see the familiar shape of a large bird in the sky, circling. It was just the right shape and size to be a vulture, but I had no hope of checking for the greyness of its feathers, as the sunlight was limited. Instead, I was stuck following it as it slowly began to sink lower. After about 10 or so minutes it landed, and I carefully snuck forward, cautiously avoiding anything that could alert the bird of my presence. I sunk low to the ground, realizing that the bird had landed in a small clearing at the far end of a park. It was just a small open field, slightly tilted down a hill, with the parking lot on top. I had been there before, as it was a fun spot for kids to roll down the hill because of how steep it was. I approached it from the bottom, excitement brimming, when I heard several squawks and shrieks of other birds. Black vultures are more aggressive than turkeys, and I was hoping to catch a spat. I got to the edge of the clearing and pulled out my binoculars. 2 things kind of hit me at once here. One, I found it odd that they were in the middle of the park, rather than closer to the road, where you'd assume they'd find roadkill. Though, I reasoned, things could die anywhere, even in the middle of a park. Secondly, however, it smelled awful. The scent was rather light, but I've been known to have a really sensitive nose, and just this sharp, coppery scent, like when you pull rotten ground meat out of a bag. I had smelled roadkill before, and in the heat of the day it smelled bad, but nothing like this. When I put my binoculars to my eyes, I expected a deer corpse and birds fighting. I never in a million years thought I would see a corpse of a completely different kind. The birds were there, and I remember the faint pang of excitement I still had, recognizing the proud head of a black vulture, before the image of it sitting on the chest of a naked woman sucked the life out of me. I was frozen, and I could not look away. My throat tightened with vomit, and I could not look away. The birds had done surprisingly little to her body. She had what I think were cuts, but most of her was intact. What wasn't, the birds were at. Her eyes, lips, and genitals were red and shredded. If there was a big defining wound, I missed it, between the gathering of the birds and the fading light, but what I did see I can never forget. I haven't forgotten. I can pull up the image so clearly now, even after all this time. She was pale, almost blue in places, with blonde crinkled hair. I sat there stupidly for who knows how long, as the sun sank behind the trees. This was a time before cell phones were a common thing, and I had quite the hike back home. I realized now I was in shock, and I could only move when the sudden fear that whoever did this could still be nearby hit me. I forced myself to slowly waddle backwards into the trees, not taking my eyes off the body. I didn't want to turn around for some reason. I was so scared someone would be behind me. I thought if I just backed up forever, maybe nothing would happen. It was dusk, and suddenly there was a light. High beams from the top of the hill, a single pair. I heard the screech of tires as the car wheeled out, and listened to it veer off to the left and away, down the road, opposite in the direction I was headed. That was the last straw, and I ran the entire way back the second I could no longer hear it. I crashed through at least a mile of brush, and while I was smart enough to have had boots and thick jeans on, my arms were bare and bleeding by the time I stopped. I paused midway through the brush by my house, realizing that, embarrassingly, I had wet myself in fear at some point, before nearly crawling my way through people's yards to get home, avoiding all passing cars. The horror didn't completely end there, as I was home alone until past midnight, as my mom worked late at a diner nearby. It was stupid, and I regret it to this day, but no, I did not call the police instantly, nor my mom. I was stupidly afraid that if I did, my mom would get mad at me. I would never be allowed to go outside again, or worse, that she wouldn't believe me for some reason. I locked all the doors, double-checked, took a quick shower, and locked myself in my room. I had fallen asleep, somehow, by the time my mom came home. I confronted her in the morning at least, but by that time, when we made the call together, the body had already been found. They took my statement. We never got any calls back. I stopped birdwatching. I tried my best to find an article or news somewhere about this, but I failed in finding anything. It probably doesn't help that I can't remember the exact date. I have a lot of missing time from ages 12 to 14 for some reason, which I can't even begin to explain. There are very few things I remember so well, this being a big one. I have never shared this story with anyone outside my own family, but I thought it might fit here, and I apologize if not. It was sort of therapeutic, I think, writing this out after so long. I'm going to keep trying to find something to verify this, and I'll update ASAP if I can. The Whistling Man. I was 15 years old at the time, and out to a weekend afternoon movie with my friend. We were quite early, So we decided to take a look around a nearby toy store to kill some time before the previews began. I was strolling absent-mindedly down an aisle by myself, looking at toys I felt far too old for, when I heard an odd whistle. If you've ever heard the iPhone notification chime, then you have an idea of the sound I heard. I thought nothing of it. Maybe it was someone's phone, and continued moving through the aisles, eventually meeting back up with my friend. We walked around a bit more, talking and laughing, and I heard that whistle once again. Being preoccupied with my conversation more than anything, I still didn't pay it any mind. On our way out of the store, I heard the whistle for a third time, but much closer, practically right over my shoulder, and I whipped around mid-sentence. A man stood there, grinning from ear to ear in a strangely sinister way. The smile didn't fully reach his eyes. He was a bit on the small side, scraggly, with long hair tied back in a low ponytail. He had on a tattered black t-shirt, which hung loosely off his thin frame, and a bulging black drawstring backpack. "Hi," he said, stretching his lips even wider around his contrastingly bright teeth. As a teenage girl, I was no stranger to the attention of older men, but something about his persona and approach set me on edge. Still, I was taught to be polite. "Hi," I responded tentatively, taking a step backwards and away from his intense stare. "I've noticed you around the store, and thought I could get your opinion on something." He unfurls a crumpled, stained copy of the toy store's weekly ad, and pointedly stabs at the Barbie doll selection with his index finger. "See, I'm looking for the perfect doll for my niece, and I just have no idea which one to pick. What do you think?" He looks up and smiles, but his eyes are dark pools of nothingness, devoid of any real interest. "This one is nice," I say, pointing to a doll at random, hardly looking at the ad. "Wow, thank you. I really appreciate that. Hey, has anyone ever told you how pretty you are? You must go to the gym often. What gym do you go to?" Taken aback by his abrupt stream of rehearsed-sounding pickup lines, I said thank you and forced a laugh. I'm young, and so is my friend. Our inexperience and his strange approach keeps us frozen in place. His eyes bored only into mine, and his grin, wider still and deeply disconcerting, never fades from his face. "Hey, do you want to be friends? I'd like very much to be friends with you. You know what friends do? They take pictures together. Let's take a picture together, since we're friends." He holds up a red flip phone, with the front cover held together by a rubber band. He activates the front-facing camera, and before I can say anything, he leans into me, face uncomfortably close, and snaps the picture. He looks at it briefly, smiles, and pockets his phone. "There, now we're friends," he says matter-of-factly, and turns his gaze back to me appraisingly. Stupidly, in a horrified daze, I nod. "So, where are you from? Where are you going after this? What do you like to do?" My friend puts her hand on my arm, and I suddenly break from my stupor. "We have to go. My dad's waiting," I say, and we turn to leave. My last, but not final, glimpse of him is with his head cocked to the side and that wide smile spread across his face. His eyes now flicker with something I can only recall as amusement. We turn our backs, and as soon as we get far enough away, we run. Fast forward to a year and a half later. I'm in my junior year of high school, and on the early morning city bus, heading to my first class of the day. The bus is packed, and I squeeze my way to the back, reaching out a hand to grab the pole as the bus brakes sharply. I hear a whistle close to my ear. When I hear it again, I adjust my earbuds in my ears. Why isn't that person answering their phone? A hand closes right above mine on the pole. It is too close, and our fingers brush, but the person holds their hand there almost intentionally. I move my hand and glance up and into the broad smile of the creepy man from the toy store. Cold chills shoot down my spine, and I grip the pole even harder until my knuckles turn white. He tilts his head, still smiling his toothy grin, and says, "Hi, friend." The bus is so jam-packed that there's nowhere else for me to go, so I turn my body as far away from him as possible, hoping that playing dumb would work in my favor, and he would go away. He leans closer still and says, "Hi, do you remember me?" I shake my head and lean as far away as I can in the tight space. He frowns and looks suddenly angry. "No, I know you. We met before. We're friends." I shake my head again, looking down, pretending to be engrossed in my music player. Maybe, if he didn't get a full look at my face, he might think he had me confused with someone else. "No, I have your picture," he says, and reaches into his drawstring bag, pulling out his red flip phone, held together by frayed rubber bands. All the while I'm thinking, if he sees me get off at the stop to my school, he'll know where I am every day and can find me easily. But if I get off at a random stop before my school, he could get off with me, and I have nowhere else to go. He's still scrolling through his phone, and I'm imagining all the other girls' pictures he might have on there when he asks, "So, what school do you go to?" I think about saying mind your own business, but then remember his angry frown from before, and give him the name of another school. It doesn't really make sense, because the bus only goes past one high school, and not the one I told him, but he nods at this and says, "Hold on, I have your picture somewhere here. We're friends." The bus pulls up to my high school, and there's nothing else I can do but to get off. While he's still preoccupied with his phone, I lose myself in the crowd and run all the way to school. I'm shivering when I get to my first period classroom, and I can hear the blood rushing in my ears. I ask my boyfriend to take the bus with me every morning for the next few weeks, and I change up my route, going to and from, but I don't see him again until 2 years later, and I am a sophomore in college. I am taking the bus home alone after a late night out with friends when I hear a weird whistle. Enough time has passed that I don't feel much alarm and exit the bus at my stop. It is completely dark out, and I am one of 2 people who get off. Then, from behind me, I hear, "Hello there. Do you remember me?" I turn around, and it's him again. It's hard to make out his features in the dark, but I instantly remember the tone of his voice, recall the whistle, the tilted head, and the wide, toothy smile. I see what looks like a backpack strapped to the front of his chest. "No," I say, and start walking faster, heart racing, wondering how fast I can run in these flip-flops. I hear him picking up speed behind me, and I dare to glance back. I glimpse him starting to run at me, his hands in his backpack, digging around for something that I don't want to know. He is angry now, smile gone, and he shouts at me, "So you want to be that way?" I start running, and don't stop until I get home. So, to the whistling man with the backpack, no, I do not want to be your friend. Let's not meet again.